Hello, my friends. Pardon me, this is William with today the 1915 Grand Duke Dmitri diary series. I'm trying to straighten myself out here. Okay. I'm still in the apartment, still trying to keep out from underfoot. The big costume ball is today. And I guess there must have been a lot of last-minute ticket sales because I'm told that there are tons of people coming up already, even though it's not even 1 o'clock in the afternoon yet. So, interesting. I think I mentioned last time I'm not going to go. I don't have a date for one thing. And yeah, it'd probably be fun, but I'm having my own little fondue gathering that was set quite a while ago, so I didn't want to change the date anyway. Well, that's probably not interesting to any of you. By the time Dmitri was at Shots Out, they were no longer having these kinds of events. Earlier on, they did, believe it or not, even in a tuberculosis sanatorium, they did have a masked ball every year. I have a fantastic photo of one that was held in 1914, before the outbreak of the war, of course. But by the time Dmitri was here, yeah, they took things a little more seriously, and they weren't having balls within the sanatorium. Okay, so here we go. Our recap, first for 1939, which is the previous video, Grunewald's depiction of Dmitri as just a really selfish person who wouldn't lift a finger to help his own sister. I don't believe it, but we'll hear more from Mr. Grunewald. And next, and also saying that he was involved with some kind of scoundrel or opportunist or something from Poland. And it sounds like Grunewald thought that this man was sort of scamming Dmitri a little bit, but I don't know. You know, Grunewald, he has his own agenda, really has his own agenda, so take all of that with a grain of salt. Okay, and our last 1915 diary entry was basically, talking about Anna Varubova's train accident, and this long letter that Dmitri had written to a woman named Irina Dolgorukova. Actually, Dolgorukova was no longer her surname. I think she'd gone from being a Dolgorukova to a Dolgorukaya, and she was a married woman, but that was kind of Dmitri's preference, along with liking women who were older than him. So, but, he said, I wonder I hope she'll take it well, or something like that. And so, but he doesn't tell us what the letter was actually about. We have another lady mentioned today, the only new member of our cast, and she is a mysterious person called Nastya. Okay, so here we go. We're up to the 5th of January in Russia. Outside of Russia, it was the 18th of January. It was a Monday, and in Usovo, and the temperature was no longer below zero. It was now on the plus side. Dmitri writes 21/2 degrees. 21 would be, wow, that would be really warm, really warm. That would be like warmer than it is now here in June at the moment. And 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 degrees Fahrenheit would be super cold. I'm not sure what the heck this rumor scale was, this French scale, but he says there's strong snow, so even though it's now on the plus side, it's not a nice summery day. Okay, here we go. I woke up around 10 o'clock. I wanted to get out of bed immediately, but my notorious weakness prevented it, and I lay around for another hour. I took a walk with Cook around 11 o'clock. The thaw is such that it's nearly impossible to either sled down the hill or ski. We lunched at 1 o'clock, Borya, GM, Cook, and I. Around 2 o'clock, GM and Borya departed from Moscow via the Pavshino station en route to Petrograd. Borya is going home and returning to the lycée, and GM will stay until Tuesday of next week. As for me, I changed into a tunic and went to the local church for theophany. The priest conducted the service so ineptly that it was just shameful. Fortunately, it didn't last long, and by 3 o'clock I was home. After church, the Alinskaya peasants brought me bread and salt along with New Year's greetings. Cook and I intended to ski until tea time, but it was too warm and also snowing hard. I sent a telegram to Nastya, telling her that I would be coming to Moscow on Saturday. I dined à deux with Cook, then we went out into the garden. Tea was at 11 o'clock, and then I went to bed. So this reference to my notorious weakness, why is it notorious? What does Dmitri mean by that word? People use it in different ways. He was notoriously merry. I don't know. Not very many people are notoriously merry, but yeah, it doesn't give you a really strong idea, except I would either he considers it his notorious weakness, or it means that other people are also baffled by it, I guess. Oh, Dmitri and his notorious weakness. I don't know. So Borya, apparently the reason Borya was at Usovo was because he joined his father on his school holiday. Now he has to return. I assume he was going to the Alexander Lycée, which was sort of the most elite gymnasium in Russia, and for people who were not preparing, for boys who were not preparing for military careers, but for, careers as academics or in the government or diplomats or something like that. So anyway, turning now to the church service. It's funny how Dmitri had this trait, if you recall, from the 1906-1907 diary entries. He had this trait of just being a little fussy about the way people do things. Oh, if children misbehave, even as a child himself, it scandalized him when children misbehaved. And if Nicholas went hunting at a time that Dmitri considered inappropriate, and if Ella went out on a rowboat with some of her invalid soldiers, that was inappropriate. And yeah, he was just this kind of fussy little guy, and now he's carried on with that. And I think, the old Freudian term that nobody uses anymore was anal retentive, right? Not very appealing. But I don't know what the modern word would be for somebody who has a hard time, really genuinely a hard time with things that don't seem to him to be done correctly. Okay, that's an interesting trait that he had. And so what is theophany? That is the blessing of the waters. You've probably seen photographs of how the Tsar the emperor would traditionally go to on the Neva River. There was this imperial enclosure on the Neva River, and the emperor would throw the cross into the water. And in the Orthodox tradition, the priest will throw a cross into the water. It's symbolically, no matter where you're at, the body of water is symbolically the Jordan River. And then if it's warm enough, boys will jump in after it to retrieve it. And it goes back to Christ's baptism, when he was baptized by John the Baptist. And anyway, in the Western Church, I think it's called Epiphany. Okay, so is it? I think so. Yeah, so that's what was going on. And then the Russian New Year, I think, yeah, I get these dates mixed up because the liturgical New Year is like in September, at least in the Greek, not the liturgical, well, I don't know, in the Greek church, and the Russian Christmas is like on the 7th of December or something. In the Greek Orthodox Church, Christmas is celebrated on the Gregorian calendar, so it is the 25th of December, even though Pascha is celebrated on the Julian calendar, so it's all very confusing. Anyway, if Dmitri says the peasants were coming from Ilinskaya, the village of Ilinskaya, to offer him bread and salt on the occasion of the New Year, then obviously he's correct about that. And bread and salt, that was the Russian tradition to show a person's, if someone was coming to your house, to greet them with bread and salt, to show them how welcome they are. And yeah, I guess it works in reverse too. They're bringing the bread and salt to him. He probably knew most of them, and they were used to having a member or members of the imperial family present at church services and in residence at Ilinskaya and Usovo. So that was a nice thing. Warm outside. It's snowing heavily, but it's warm outside. I'm sure I would not have considered it warm outside. I don't even like the fact that it's 15 degrees here at the moment. I wish it was a little warmer. Anyway, who is Nastya? Well, I've come across the name. There's a Nastya in the 1908, one of the 1908 letters that Dmitri wrote. I don't have that with me. I didn't look it up. My colleagues in Russia who did this transcript, which is a big help because Dmitri wrote these diary entries in pencil and sort of in his usual way crammed lots of words in and didn't write very legibly. And so they managed to get further than I did, and they did a transcript. And so, yeah, Nastya, what was I going to say about that? Just that they don't know who she was either. And yeah, we'll see if the name comes up soon because he's going to be in Moscow and he wants to meet up with her, clearly. So maybe we'll find out more about her, although not enough, I guess, to identify her if my Russian colleagues didn't find a way to identify her, even with the later diary entries. But yeah, maybe the earlier letters that they don't have yet. The 1908 letter, as I say. Anyway, he's arranging this little rendezvous, so we'll see what happens with that, even if we don't know who exactly she was. That will be coming up, but this is a Monday, and he won't be in Moscow till the Saturday. Okay, so the main thing I wanted to talk about in relation to this one is just this idea of the infantilization of royalty. This has been something that always has appeared to me to be the case, even now, that if you're royal, you're surrounded by so many people who are taking care of everything for you, even your body, that you're kind of like a child surrounded by nannies. You kind of never leave the nursery unless you have a forceful enough personality to say, okay, enough. Go away, leave me alone. You can arrange things on the calendar, but you're not going to treat me like a child. And here we have these figures from Dmitri's childhood, literally, Cook and Laming, and they're still like his nannies. They're still, I don't know if it was him who said, oh, please come with me, or if it was Nicholas who said, oh, go and take care of Dmitri and Usovo. I don't know, but it's too bad. It really is, and at least for Dmitri, and for other people after the revolution, they had to learn to stand on their own feet. And Dmitri, initially, during that very difficult transitional period, he was very fortunate to have the Lamings, and that I think was totally a good thing. I don't know what he would have done without them. And I think it's perfectly reasonable, even though he was 26 years old, that he needed somebody. Because can you imagine your whole world just ceasing to exist? And your entire family in peril, and how do you deal with that? So thank God he had the Marlings. But at this point, it's kind of like, old boy, okay, you want to have people with you. You don't want to be just alone out here. But yeah, you're 23 now. But it probably wasn't even his choice. Anyway, and that's sort of my modern and non-royal prejudice, that it was a shame that this happened. And if it still happens with royalty, it's a shame. And it's not even necessarily something that they always want, I think. Sometimes you have these courtiers who have been, I think, within the royal families for years, and they're very sort of aggressive about controlling things. And like I said, it probably takes quite a forceful personality to push them into the background. And Dmitri did have a forceful personality. But at this particular point in his life, he was still putting up with this. Yeah, and if I'm making conjectures that actually aren't true, then forgive me for that. There are certainly many of you viewing who know more about royalty than I do. So what do we have? And I also wanted to say there are some interesting parallels between 1959 and 1939 and 1915. And you have Grunwald trying to play this role, very obviously trying to play this role in Dmitri's life in a meddlesome way that Dmitri didn't appreciate. Anyway, we'll see more about that. But it just seems to me that from the time he was a kid, it seems like it was kind of him in particular, that he was kind of made to feel that he was incompetent, and that he couldn't do things for himself, and that he was just sort of this silly boy who needed people, even as an adult, to supervise him. And if he didn't have that, he would go off the deep end in some way. So that's unfortunate. I think he was a lot trying to compensate for that. This idea that Alexandra had and that other people had, Dmitri just is kind of hopeless. And you do, throughout the diaries, see him really trying to compensate for that, and really, really important to him to gain people's respect. And rightly so, he certainly was not a hopeless person. He was a very intelligent person. And if people saw him that way and they sold him on that idea, and it became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, then that's really too bad, isn't it? So our next section of the 1939 diary, we will have a claim from Grunwald that Dmitri is really, really abandoning or mistreating, I should say, not abandoning, but mistreating Maria, because according to Grunwald, Dmitri is still rich. And, I have evidence to the contrary, but that's what Grunwald is telling Dmitri. So we'll take a look at that. And then 1915, the next 1915 diary entry, the diary entry for the 6th of January, there is an absolute bombshell. And I think when you find out what it is, I don't think you'll consider that hyperbole. It's something that I didn't know until I got the transcript of 1915, and then I saw the word, and it's a form of medical treatment that points to a very specific disease, and it's not tuberculosis. And this for me was a real revelation, and I think my Russian colleagues, not having a background also in medical history as I do, probably missed. They saw the treatment and they probably didn't realize what it was for. But it's pretty clear, and it's pretty surprising. So do come back for that. And yeah, let's see, is it the weekend? Yeah, Saturday. Have a good weekend if you're watching this on the Saturday, and hopefully I'll see you next time.